Yeah, I never imagined. I actually went into fertility care way before I imagined that I would be a fertility patient myself.
We're going live right now, guys. And,
okay,
so we are. We're streaming. We got it. We're being live streamed, and we are so grateful for you all to be here. And we are even more grateful that Dr. Meivys Garcia is here with us from Markham Fertility, who is now the actually CEO. Woohoo, woohoo, woohoo.
That's right.
Which is one of the leading fertility clinics in the country. And not only that, she has the time to multitask being a mama of 2 children with a fertility story of your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
She believes in specialized and individualized fertility care, taking both the body and the mind into the equation, which is awesome because, as you know, naturopathic doctor, traditional Chinese medicine specialist, we are holistic. So we love working together in an integrative fashion. She's an advocate for destigmatizing infertility. And as an IVF mom herself, she has candidly shared her own struggles. So let's hear all about your journey through fertility, Dr. Garcia. Thank you so much for being here.
And then actually then just so that people have a lineup of what we're covering. So yes, we want to hear about your story. And then we're going to cover some myths and some questions and some of the most common questions asked. Okay. And it might be divided into 2 episodes, just so you know. And that's that. So let's hear about your story, Dr. Garcia.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I never imagined. I actually went into fertility care way before I imagined that I would be a fertility patient myself. So it was not the other way around. I always was interested in women's health. I did my medical school training. I did my obstetrics and gynecology training for 5 years. And then I actually chose to do some specialty training in infertility. And while I was already a fertility specialist, is when I got married. I was still fairly young, only 33 years old when I got married. Perfectly healthy, regular cycle, totally in love, on top of the world, thinking it would be very easy to conceive. I've done hard things like medical school and whatnot, and I didn't imagine that things would become difficult for me. But sure enough, they did. So I had essentially unexplained infertility. Tried and never got pregnant for about a year, then did an IVF cycle. I did my first IVF cycle while I was still in training to be a fertility specialist. And I did it at a different clinic from where I trained and a different clinic from where I eventually went to work. So it was not Markham Fertility Center where I did my first fertility treatment.
So here's a question. I'm going to cut in. Did you tell people while you were training?
Yeah, so that's what I was going at. I didn't. I actually chose to go 2 hours away from, I was living in London and training in London at a time. And I would take the train for 2 hours to go to Toronto and do fertility treatments in Toronto because I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed of this. I did not tell my mentors. I did not tell my teachers. I did not tell my colleagues. I did not tell my friends. And I just didn't tell my parents. It was literally just me and my husband and me like lying and saying I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that because I was driving for 2 hours back and forth to do the treatments. So I remember very vividly what it's like having that shame. And that's why now I go out of my way to talk about it and to destigmatize it. I had a patient yesterday, well, not yesterday, it was a few days ago, who was talking to me about being ashamed and feeling like she wasn't a woman because she couldn't conceive. And, I was talking to her through the video because unfortunately we're still in COVID and we can't see people in person. And I just wanted to reach over the screen and give her the biggest hug. But it made me think, if I could fix one thing, of course, I would fix your infertility. But more than that, I would want to fix that feeling of not being enough. I remember feeling like that. And if somebody came and told me from the outside, you're not enough because you're not a mother, I would probably think that person, it's crazy. But when you hear your own voice telling you that, then you tend to believe it, right? So I definitely experienced that shame. And I also experienced, honestly, being at a fertility clinic where I didn't get the best care. I won't say which fertility clinic it was.
I was going to say that. Don't tell anybody.
No, I'm not saying. But I felt like a number. And even though I knew a lot of things about fertility, I was still really brushed off and rushed and felt like a number, and was not a good experience at all, even though my knowledge of fertility was fairly good at the time. So that treatment did not work. I had many eggs retrieved. I've always had really good ovarian reserve. I was telling somebody, I did the numbers, and it turns out that I ended up making 100 eggs to have 2 children. So doing 5 IVF, about 20 eggs every time, I would have to 100 eggs to actually get 2 embryos that built my family. So lots of eggs retrieved, 3 embryo transfers later, and I was not pregnant. And now I have finished my training, and then I had to look for a job and make the career and get to Markham Fertility Center, and then did the rest of my treatments there. So that's where my first son was conceived, with my first IVF cycle at Markham Fertility Center.
So wait a minute. So that means you actually came out of your shell and you were upfront about your fertility.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's amazing.
Yeah, well, so now I'm working there, and I have to tell people, because I'm doing the treatment in the same place where I'm working.
Yes.
I still have walls, though. I still had quite a bit of walls around me. I still felt people were so supportive, and I was a little bit more assertive at the time, and but I still have, I don't think I told my friends. I told the people I was working with, but I don't think I told my friends. And I don't think I really made it public knowledge at the time. Once I started making it public knowledge was, so when my son was born, I had still 4 embryos left. And I thought, this is going to be easy having a second child, because I've done IVF. I've got 4 beautiful embryos. One of them, the first one, it's my son. So the other ones, there was no genetic testing done at the time, because it was back in 2012. But I thought, okay, it's pretty realistic to expect that I would just have another embryo transfer and get pregnant again. So I transferred one at a time, times 3, and I didn't get pregnant. And then I was like, okay, now I've got to do another IVF. And that's when it got really, really tricky, because before I never had any miscarriages. So now I started having miscarriages. And then I had to do more IVFs. But of course, now I'm older. Now I had my first at 33, then now I'm 35, and then I'm 36, and I'm 37. So I ended up having my second child at age 40. But big difference in the egg quality when you're 33 and when you're 40. Like I had 4 embryos at 33, and I would not make embryos or healthy blastocysts going forward as I was getting older. So that's when I started to really come out of my shell and talk about it. And by this time now, I've been in practice for about 4 years or 5 years. So certainly I see what I was talking about more, and I started feeling a little bit braver in talking about it. And then I did my last cycle thinking, I was 40 at the time, thinking this is it. I'm just going to do this and close the book. And that is my 5-year-old today.
Yes.
So it was really after I had the 2 experiences, primary infertility, and people saying, oh, all I need is one. And if I have one, I'm going to be happy. And then experiencing secondary infertility, which is a very different experience, because then, you have a child, and then there is all the emotions of, like, I love my child so much. Why do I need more? Am I being greedy? Is it not enough? And all of those feelings around it. So it was after my experience of secondary infertility and recurrent miscarriages, which is also a different beast from infertility alone, that I really felt like I had a lot to share and a lot to contribute. And even during my journey, there was a time when I really looked at what it looked like. Like, who am I if I'm not a mother? And at what point do I feel like it's time to close the book? So I even went there a little bit before I had my last one. So yeah, it was really after having to try for my second one that I came out of my shell when I started sharing my story.
Well, and we appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching or listening, and if you don't follow Dr. Garcia, you need to. You have beautiful, inspiring posts. What is your Instagram handle?
It's at Dr. Meivys Garcia.
Okay, so there we have it.
Yeah.
And so you contribute in so many ways. And when I invited you on our show, you're like, oh gosh, there's so many things that we can answer. Let's discover, let's talk about some myths. So let's dive into that. It's a beautiful story, and it's yes.
Before we do, I have to comment on one of your recent posts, which I loved about how you and used it myself about the train versus the climbing the mountain.
Right.
Maybe share that a little bit. Talk about that, because I think it's so important on a fertility journey. So talk about that
right.
post.
Yeah. One of my patients reached out to me and said, you need to share that with the fertility community. So I always thought, I'm going to go to medical school and become a doctor. Then I'm going to get married and I'm going to have children, and that's it. And then I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a mother. I'm going to be a wife. And then I'm going to feel perfect and fulfilled, and everything is going to be great. And then I did that. I did all of that. And ever since I was a little girl, I knew that's what I wanted in life. And then I did all of that. And it's not that I wasn't happy. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that is what I wanted. It wasn't one of these existential crises where I was never wanted to be a doctor. I never wanted to be a mother. I knew that was exactly what I wanted and that I was doing exactly what I wanted. But then I realized that like I said in my post, when you get to the top of the mountain, it's not like automatic rainbows and unicorns that come out. You really still realize that there is another mountain and that there is more growth to do. So that's why I came with the analogy of more like a train. So rather than climbing and you go there and you sit at the top and you're like, I made it, now what? It's more the growth that you go through as you go through every station of life, from being a student, to being a doctor, to being a resident, to being a fertility patient, to being a fertility doctor, to now being the new co-owner and medical director of Market Fertility Center. Every one of those things is a station that you go through life. And from going from one station to another, it is the growth that happens in that time that really matters. It's not the destination, because in the end, we're all going to end up in the same place. But it is what you do during that time that matters, as opposed to the actual goal of getting, quote unquote, to the top of the mountain. So it was my birthday and I was just sitting there and reflecting on my last 45 years. So I decided to write that post.
No, it's beautiful. And it's really a testament to, the strength as we as women have. And you don't know what you're going to be faced with in the mountains, right? And so it's being in that face of challenge and being in that present moment and doing what it takes. Right?
Taking the pause. Yeah. Taking the pause at the stations and just soaking in the experiences rather than losing your footing, climbing a mountain and, losing yourself either in health or in mind, right? Physical health or in mind. So,
and I struggle with that, because when I was going through infertility, I mean, if you told me this, I might roll my eyes and say, no, I'm pretty sure I just need to get pregnant. I'll be very happy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I do not need to soak any of this. But it's only when you look back, right? When you look back and connect the dots. When I was in it, I remember thinking, what's the point of this? What's the lesson? This isn't fair. But now that I look back, and I know it's easy to say because I have children that I'm so happy I went through that, but it really is the person that I became because of that experience. And I always tell my patients, you're not the person that starts IVF cycle number 1. It's not the same person that starts IVF cycle number 3 or 4 or 5. You really change as you go through the process. You grow, you become stronger, wiser. And so you can't think that the person at the beginning of the journey, she has a collection of thoughts and feelings that are going to be different as you go through the journey. And I wouldn't say it's the point, but it is the growth of that changes you and challenges us. And it's the point of the thing. It's not the thing. It's the journey that is the point.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this is the podcast, by the way, guys.
Right.
There's other stuff.
There's 4 stages of grief, and then they added that 5th one, which is finding meaning. And I think y'all don't really know and connect the dots to see that at the end of it, like until we're past it, that we've,
until
and I think that's
past,
what
yes,
that you found your meaning in it.
That's
and,
right.
I think all 3 of us can attest to that. And when you're in it, there's no way you're just stuck in anger and bargaining and, you know, sadness. It's a hard journey until you kind of, and it, you know, as a person now, you probably reflect back and say, I wish I could have these thoughts back then.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about, I mean, I don't have regrets about that. Like, I think it's part of the growing, right? I don't know if you have regrets about how you're being around it. I certainly don't. And I think it's I'm a better, well-rounded human being for it, as a practitioner, as a mom, as a wife, as a, you know, a citizen of the world. You know?
I think I would have liked to have had less shame, because I was the same. Our journeys are very parallel for primary and secondary. And I would go incognito. I didn't drive 2 hours away, but I'd be incognito, glasses, hat in the fertility clinic. And there were patients sitting across from me a couple of times who are like, and I just didn't want them to know who I was. And I would like to go back and say, you know what, that's okay. We're all here together. You know,
that's right.
Like,
that's right.
Yeah. And
that's the only thing.
And, you know, so I'm going to pipe in here too. So we all have different journeys, and we have all different sets of comforts or discomforts. And so I think it sounds like both of you did not come out until you were really in midstream. And I kind of wanted to be more open. Now in the clinic, I certainly had shame around it, because it's like, you know, we're treating fertility patients and I'm not fertile. And so what does that look like for me? And I'm treating people, right? It's like, am I a fraud? And really the reality is that we're actually human and there are challenges, and that's that. And so with the fear of being found out, it kept me silent. But one day, I just remember very clearly, I don't actually remember the person, but a patient came in and she was so distraught. And it was a very similar circumstance to my own. And I thought, you know what she needs? She needs to know that she's not alone. So it was my first time. I was a little scared. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share my story. And I shared my fertility challenge. And she's like, oh my gosh, thank you for telling me, because, you know, that is so helpful, because I am alone in this. So just like that, it turned her journey around, knowing that she's not alone, and knowing as a practitioner, I fully understood her. And in that moment, she trusted me that much more. So for those of you that are listening, just know that, you know, like we can hide in our hearts and think certain ways, or like, you know, think about people judging us. But most of the time people don't. And if you're in a situation, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but certainly I have a lot of a lot of physicians now. And one of them said, you know, we're all residents, and 3 out of 4 of us, my core friends, all have fertility issues. So imagine they now have camaraderie because they actually spoke to each other, but they could silently be going through their journeys, not knowing that each other are doing the same thing. Right. Anyway,
that's the thing about infertility. It can affect anybody of any stages of life. And I had a similar story. I was like, how can I have patients to trust me about their fertility when I can, you know, when I can't even fix myself? And it was a similar story of a patient feeling so sad and frustrated. And I just started telling patients like one by one as they were needing it. And I started noticing like what a difference it made, and how it made them feel less alone. And we can all share that, and made them realize that I really didn't have like a magic wand. If I did, then neither one of us would be in this situation. So I started noticing the power of sharing your story. And that's when I actually went to Instagram and I started talking about it more.
Well, thank you. Okay. So I think that's one podcast down. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, let's have you all come back, join us for our next episode where we're gonna, blow some myths out of its water, and with Dr. Garcia here. So thank you for joining us. And so please subscribe, like, share, and because this is all done for you, and we need to share this because as women, again, we don't want to be alone and silent in this. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.